I was weak. That's why I needed you. Needed someone to punish me for my sins. But that's all over now.
In the 2000s era, Silent Hill games were basically the spices of horror gaming and maybe even gaming in general. Every couple of years back then, people would expect a new installment of the franchise, and the high quality was guaranteed. People loved how every character had their own mental problems and delusions, and every game succeeded in being creative to avoid falling into the trap of repetition. However, this tradition has ceased to exist in the last 10 years, and many of you are probably wondering why the Silent Hill series became a lost series that's only relevant to the past and has no place in the present despite its major success. At one point, Capcom was actually jealous of Silent Hill and tried hard to make Resident Evil catch up with its popularity and emulate its unique concept. That's why they made Resident Evil 3.5 in the first place, which was heavily inspired by elements from Silent Hill 2 before its cancellation. But now you can see Resident Evil games are still relevant and coming out every couple of years, and they're actually on top of the chart when it comes to sales numbers. You probably wondered at some point why this is not the case for Silent Hill, and why the franchise technically died and was buried. Well, the reason for that, my friend, is the curse of gradual decline, and the absence of consistency. When Silent Hill Homecoming came out in 2008, it was a good game, but gamers started noticing something that made them worried. They noticed that the charm of the Silent Hill franchise is pretty much non-existent in the game. The experience was okay, but as a normal survival horror game, and not as a Silent Hill game. When Shattered Memories came out the next year in 2009, it was better, but still not even close to what Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and 4 were meant to be. From this point on, Konami started to freak out because the sales simply kept shrinking and shrinking, and there was no motive to keep making new installments. But despite that, Konami decided to give it one more shot and focus on making a new installment that could save the series and decide its fate. The installment in question was Downpour. And if you're not living in 2012 right now, then you obviously know how things ended for this installment and the consequences that happened because of it. Before I continue talking about this part, which focuses more on the financial and commercial side, let me first explain to you this game and its story to help you decide if it's underrated or actually deserves its infamous reputation. So get your cup of coffee ready and let's delve into its mystical world. The protagonist here is Murphy Pendleton, a convicted felon who is serving time at Ryle State Prison for stealing a police cruiser. He is haunted by an unknown motive for vengeance, and it eventually led him to make a deal with the corrupt officer George Sewell. This deal was to grant him access to an inmate called Patrick in the prison shower room. Despite Patrick's confusion, Murphy reminds him of their past as neighbors before brutally assaulting him. The scene then fades to black just before Murphy delivers the final strike. Afterwards, a riot erupted at the prison, which led Murphy and a small group of inmates to find themselves slated for relocation to Wayside Maximum Security Prison. Anne Cunningham was assigned to join them on the transport bus, and she is a corrections officer from Wayside who displays a distinct fascination with Murphy and finds him interesting. As the bus travels near eastern Silent Hill town, the road takes an unexpected turn, abruptly disappearing into nowhere. The driver struggles to regain control, yanking on the wheel, resulting in the bus crashing through road barriers and careening down a hill. After regaining consciousness in a forest beside the crashed bus, Murphy decides to escape, which is the obvious thing to do as an inmate. However, Officer Ann then locates him in the wild and tries to apprehend him, but slips into a deep valley, struggling to hold on. At this point, you, who are in control of Murphy, are left with two choices. You can choose to be a douchebag and abandon her and let her die, or you can provide assistance and save her. Regardless of your decision, Anne eventually falls anyway, which means that the developers were messing with us and wasting our time. After this incident, Murphy ends up on the outskirts of Silent Hill, where he encounters Howard Blackwood, an unusually calm mailman who seems suspicious. During their short and bizarre conversation, Howard informs Murphy that the roads are impassable and suggests using the nearby Skytram as the best exit from town. Suddenly, Murphy spots a mysterious wheelchair-bound entity in a nearby house window. Somehow Howard acts like he didn't see the figure and goes to complete the rest of his mail deliveries. Despite feeling a bit disoriented and confused about his surroundings, Murphy heads towards the deserted Devil's Pit Stop diner. Inside the kitchen, he stumbles upon a gas leak and attempts to shut it off, but he unintentionally triggers a fire, and in an effort to extinguish the flames, he activates the sprinklers. However, instead of putting out the fire, the sprinklers transform the diner into a nightmarish underwater realm.
What the hell? What the hell is this?
Murphy then encounters the Void while navigating through this surreal setting, and it's basically a force rapidly drawing everything into its grasp. Murphy here knew that resisting wouldn't help him and decided to retreat. Eventually, he found himself back in the regular version of the diner as if nothing had happened. This is when Murphy started to feel that something was not normal in this location. He then decides to examine the surroundings of the diner and ventures into an abandoned house. Here, he finds Sanchez, an escaped prisoner who looks like he is assaulting what appears to be a defenseless woman. Murphy steps in to help, but he soon realizes that the woman is something called a screamer, which swiftly kills Sanchez by slashing his throat. Murphy finds himself forced to fight the creature, but he successfully defeats it. Even though he's unstable and confused, he cautiously continues his exploration, eventually stumbling upon a change of clothes and a police badge. The badge, adorned with a black mourning band, proves that its owner is dead. After switching out of his prison outfit, Murphy plays the arcade puzzle Jailbreak, which allows him to earn a ticket for the Skytram that transports him to the Devil's Pit Gorge in the southeastern part of Silent Hill. In Devil's Pit, Murphy encounters John, a sad former tour guide.
But this place used to be filled with all kinds of visitors. Moms and dads and little kids and... Yeah, it was a really nice place.
I'm sorry. You are...
John informs Murphy about an old railcar train in the mines that can transport him to the main town. While exploring the caverns, Murphy discovers a newspaper article about a train accident that claimed the lives of 8 children, which was caused by John, who was drinking at the time. Subsequently, Murphy encounters John as he's trying to delete himself, with you having the option to console or mock him. Regardless of the choice, John jumps anyway, proving that your choice is useless again. Murphy then proceeds to locate and activate the railcar, leading to a perilous journey through monster-infested mines. The train suddenly derails and Murphy loses consciousness. After a while, he awakes near an exit and finds a bloodied Anne, whose sole focus is apprehending him. Despite Murphy's attempts to reason with her, Anne remains determined to catch him. During the arrest, Anne discovers the mourning badge, leading to a moment of distress as she recognizes its previous owner. Overwhelmed with emotions, Anne nearly shoots Murphy in anger, asserting that individuals like him don't deserve to live. However, she ultimately can't go through with it and breaks down in tears.
I can't do it.
Go!
And then tells Murphy to leave her alone, which is a request he was okay with. Murphy then explores the main streets of Silent Hill, encountering various town creatures. Afterwards, he enters the deserted hillside apartment building to seek shelter from the rain. And this place is where a nearby radio plays broadcasts from DJ Bobby Ricks. Some of the broadcasts include song requests directed at Murphy, while others are desperate pleas for help. When the rain stops, Murphy sets out to find Ricks and ends up crossing paths with Howard Blackwood. Howard informs Murphy that the radio station is in the Centennial Building, before disappearing into the fog once again. Murphy discovers the building and finds his parole papers attached to the entrance, triggering a flashback to Ryle Prison. In the flashback, Murphy and George engage in a private conversation, discussing their agreement to murder Patrick, the secluded inmate from the opening scene. Officer Frank Coleridge witnesses their discussion and hands Murphy his files. When Frank inquires about the conversation, Murphy evades the question. Frank then advises Murphy to be cautious with Officer George, noting that such deals usually end poorly for the participants. It becomes evident that Frank has worked diligently to secure Murphy's early release from Ryle because he believes Murphy is genuinely a good person. Frank expresses confusion over why someone as intelligent as Murphy would impulsively steal a police car for no apparent reason. The flashback then ends, and Murphy resumes his search for DJ Ricks within the building. As Murphy climbs the floors of the building, he experiences another vision of Ryle Prison. In this vision, Murphy is seen talking to Officer George in his office, confirming their decision to carry out the plan to kill Patrick. During the conversation, George reviews the terms of their agreement and ominously says, "You owe me one."
Remember, Cupcake, you owe me one.
Additionally, George suggests that Murphy deliberately stole the police cruiser and got arrested to confront Patrick Napier in prison, although the reason behind this action remains undisclosed. Murphy then exits the room, and the vision fades away. Murphy eventually finds DJ Ricks, who initially behaves casually but becomes cautious, implying someone or something is listening. Ricks reveals that he has operated the radio station for a long time and that he is awaiting help. He informs Murphy of an escape boat at the marina, but mentions the keys were stolen by an intruder. Despite Murphy suggesting solutions like hot wiring, Ricks claims the rules of the town must be followed, which is a weird statement, considering that the situation shouldn't be about following rules at this point. Anyway, Anne then arrives, and as usual, she wants to arrest Murphy. She's simply obsessed with finishing this task. However, Screamers then suddenly start an attack as punishment for Ricks breaking the rules, and this leads to the kidnapping of both Anne and Ricks. The building transforms into a prison-like otherworld, and Murphy escapes the void, encounters the wheelman one more time, and ultimately falls off the building's clock tower. Awakening on a bench in the fog world, Murphy once again finds Howard, who hands him a letter summoning him to St. Maria's Monastery. Confused and frustrated, Murphy initially rejects the letter, but Howard insists that it's not about his desire, hinting that he has a deeper understanding of the mysterious town. With no alternative, Murphy reluctantly accepts the letter and proceeds. Navigating through the stormy town, he reaches the dilapidated monastery. There, a cryptic nun informs him, "You are the only family we were able to locate," and requests that he explore the premises before inviting him to the building's morgue when ready. Murphy then realizes that he needs an alternative path to reach the morgue. Along the way, he finds a small boy behind a locked door who believes Murphy is the bogeyman, and this is because some anonymous crying girl told him so. To prove that he is not the bogeyman, Murphy must memorize a poem recited by the orphanage children.
Go away. If you say it fast enough, he can't hurt you. Do you know it?
No. But if there's a rhyme that can do that, I sure wish you'd teach it to me.
Flashbacks then reveal Murphy's son, Charlie, who drowned years ago, and this explains the frequent water theme in Murphy's Otherworld. Here, it becomes very clear that Patrick was responsible for Charlie's death, fueling Murphy's strong disdain and hatred for child murderers and abusers, which is a reasonable sentiment, as we all know.
Come on, Daddy, hurry up!
Charlie! Charlie! Charlie!
The hallucinations and clues that refer to Charlie in the game can actually be found even before that scene. The entire Silent Hill town is full of hints and documents that mention his disappearance and death. Murphy is seeing this because he could never forget about Charlie, and that's why he wanted to get revenge from Patrick in the first place. Anyway, let's go back to where we left off, the Bogeyman issue. During the present time, Murphy returns to the locked door, where the real freaking bogeyman appears and kills the boy before Murphy can even finish reciting the weird poem. But in a disturbing moment, the bogeyman shushes Murphy as he completes reciting the poem as fast as he can. The unlocked door allows Murphy to approach the child's body, who's now resembling his son Charlie. As he mourns, a young girl accuses him of causing Charlie's death. Murphy gets shocked and he starts pursuing her, fearing the bogeyman might harm her too. However, the monastery transforms into the other world during the chase, with Murphy dodging the void and even the bogeyman. Eventually, he reaches the morgue, where the nun from the entrance stands beside a covered gurney. Murphy protests, claiming a mistake because he already buried his son years ago and there's no way he died today. The nun suggests that everyone grieves differently, and in a surprising moment that I personally didn't anticipate, she unveils a dead bogeyman beneath the sheet. Murphy becomes enraged and insists the monster isn't his son and that it's only a murderer. The nun calmly advises Murphy to accept him as his own, telling him about the dangers of revenge and the path he's chosen.
Far off the path to not even realize who you are.
What the hell are you talking about?
So often the answers are before us, Murphy. If only we allow ourselves to see them.
Why are you doing this to me?
Murphy concedes that his actions against Patrick did not solve anything, but tries to justify them anyway. The nun, however, asserts that the answers are very clear in front of him, but only if he chooses to see them. Murphy notices a key around the bogeyman's neck with a silver keychain labeled Freedom, matching the description of Rick's missing boat keys. The nun offers them to him, but for one condition, and her condition is that he must embrace the bogeyman as his own. Murphy accepts the keys, which triggers the bogeyman to come to life and attack him.
Welcome home, Mr. Hamilton.
But for some reason, they are both weirdly transferred to a forest area by a lakeshore, where they engage in battle, which ends with Murphy defeating the bogeyman with his own hammer. Back in the morgue, the dead and unmasked bogeyman lies on the gurney, and its face switching between Murphy's and Patrick's in a disturbing way. Charlie appears, congratulating his father on the victory against the bogeyman. Murphy then acknowledges that his past actions did not ease his guilt, but tells Charlie that it doesn't matter, and this victory won't bring him back anyway. However, Charlie reassures him and tries to make him feel better, saying it isn't his fault, and that he basically shouldn't feel any blame. It's really a sad moment between a father and his son, and this is probably the most Silent Hill-like part of the game. We all know that Silent Hill games are all about tragedy, despair, and dealing with trauma due to certain tragic events from the past. Anyway, Murphy feels a sudden surge of remorse and apologizes to Patrick, who has become the bogeyman, before shutting his eyes. After this emotional scene between Murphy and his son, Murphy is left only with the keys. He touches the word freedom and then exits the morgue. Now, after getting the boat keys, he escapes the monastery through the sewer system. He reaches the marina and gets on Rick's boat. He then leaves Silent Hill, but Anne suddenly shows up behind him with a gun pointed at his head, demanding that he go back to Silent Hill. She says that the town revealed things to her, that it understands her, and that it won't let them go until they resolve their issues, which kind of indicates that Anne has been infected by the town's hallucinations.
Here?
We're not going to Wayside.
What are you saying?
Turn the boat around.
Are you out of your mind? We're free! When we reach the opposite shore, I'll go one way, you can go the other. It's that easy.
We've got unfinished business, you and I.
I have no idea what the hell you're talking about, and honestly, I don't care anymore. There is no way in hell I'm going back.
It wasn't a request.
We've both just been through hell. Haven't you been paying attention?
No, you haven't been paying attention. You think this is all an accident, just a big coincidence? This town, it knows me. It showed me things. It wants me to finish this. Don't you understand? It'll never let us go until we finish what we started. What you started.
Despite Anne's strong language, Murphy rejects her request and challenges her to kill him. Unfortunately, Anne agrees, and she fires the gun.
Fine.
However, the scene then flashes back to a conversation between George and Murphy at the jail. After Murphy had confronted Patrick, George tells Murphy that he arranged the encounter with Patrick and ignored it, and it is now Murphy's turn to do him a favor. George instructs Murphy to kill someone for him, presumably a prisoner, who George says has it coming and deserves to die.
What do you want me to do?
What you're good at, of course. Ridding the world of monsters. I got another one for you.
Who is it?
Don't worry yourself about the details, Cupcake. Just take out the garbage like you did before and we'll be square.
When?
He then tells him that there will be a commotion at the jail that night, which will give Murphy a chance to sneak away to the showers, where he will encounter this person who should be killed. Murphy then wakes up in a jail cell at Overlook Penitentiary, where the wheelman is staring at him from behind the bars.
Welcome home.
Murder's a mortal sin. Go to hell for murder.
You know what
So often the answers are before us, Murphy. It doesn't matter what you want. We allow ourselves to see them.
Murphy soon leaves after the doors unlock, letting him wander around the jail. He discovers a note with his name on it, telling him to go to the showers. He makes his way through the jail and fights off enemies until he reaches the showers. Inside the showers, there are 4 signs of a crime scene: a bloodstain, a homemade knife, a morning police badge, and a sack of evidence. He inspects all 4 and then hears a voice from behind him along with a flashlight beam. Murphy walks towards the light, which turns off when he gets close, and blood starts dripping under the doors. He opens them and sees another shower area with a wrapped human body on the ground. Murphy gets closer to the body, and the world around him changes to the other world. Murphy dashes through it while dodging enemies and the void once more until he finally gets to a huge door with 2 enormous scales of justice in front of it. Murphy puts the prison shank the sack of evidence and the police badge on one scale, and the doors unlock. Inside, there are platforms, jail cells, and a much bigger version of the wheelman who has been following Murphy throughout the game. However, this time, the creature turns aggressive, and Murphy has to run around the room, and in order to defeat the creature, he must pull out its giant tubes that keep it alive. Murphy eventually defeats the wheelman and returns to the showers, where the monster's weak body lies dead. But, as usual, Anne simply doesn't give up, and she shows up from nowhere and sees the scene with horror. Murphy is confused and looks down, only to see Officer Frank's body instead of the wheelman's in one of the worst twists that he could have imagined.
Monster.
No. No, that's not how it was supposed to go. That's not what I agreed to.
In case you don't remember, Frank was a nice cop who always advised Murphy to stay away from George, who is basically a corrupt, immoral cop. A flashback then shows that Murphy went to the showers during the prison riot with a hidden shank, but he found Frank there, who told him that he was expecting George. Frank then realizes that Murphy has something behind his back. At that time, Murphy did not know that Frank had agreed to testify against Patrick for an internal probe, exposing George's crimes and violations at the prison, which would surely land him in jail. Then George comes in and urges Murphy to stab Frank and keep his promise, while Frank tries hard to persuade Murphy to drop his weapon. It's really an insane situation where everything can go wrong very fast.
Don't do this.
Come on, Murphy, you gonna keep your end of the bargain or not? Do it, you son.
No.
No.
When the game goes back to the present, Anne discloses that Frank is actually her father, and she expresses deep admiration for him, which is why she chose to follow his path into law enforcement. Following the riot that occurred in the prison, Frank was brutally assaulted, which left him in a very weak state until his eventual demise, dependent on a wheelchair and life support. In case you haven't noticed already, the wheelman that has been following Murphy across the game is actually a manifestation of Frank in Murphy's mind. He's the only one who can see it, and that's why he couldn't understand why it's everywhere. However, there's a big misunderstanding here, because Anne is unaware that Officer George is the one who assaulted her father and not Murphy. Anne tells Murphy that every time she looked at her father through the years, she saw one monster in her mind, and that monster is none other than Murphy. But just when I thought that the plot twists were over, Murphy somehow transforms into the bogeyman itself, as Anne talks about how she manipulated the circumstances to have him transferred to her prison, presumably with the intention of getting the revenge that she wanted from him. It becomes clear here that Anne is also hallucinating, which will lead her to shoot at Murphy with no remorse. But Murphy is not Murphy anymore, and the bogeyman survives the shot and runs after Anne to kill her. What happens next depends on your moral decisions throughout the game, and also on your choice to either spare or kill Anne. The diverse choices allow you to reach 6 possible endings. 5 of them can be reached in the first playthrough, and the 6th one when you replay the game. In this ending, the bogeyman disarms Anne, but when you decide to spare her, he drops the hammer and walks away. A flashback then reveals Murphy's refusal to kill Officer Frank during the riot at the prison. George becomes frustrated by Murphy's behavior, severely beats Frank himself, and frames Murphy for the incident. In the present, Murphy reverts to his human form and apologizes to Anne. When Anne learns of Murphy's innocence, she forgives him and they hug. They find themselves on a peaceful lakeshore in the real world. When the police call Anne, she lies about Murphy's fate, claiming he died. Murphy asks about her well-being, but Anne urges him to leave before the police arrive. Murphy departs, and the scene concludes with Anne gazing at the lake under clear skies. This ending is basically the same as the previous one, but when Murphy apologizes and Anne forgives him, they reappear by the crashed bus in the real world. Murphy decides to leave before the police arrive, expressing that he has somewhere to be, and Anne thanks him for telling the truth as he departs. But now, after Anne became aware of George's true responsibility for her father's death, she confronted him, seemingly holding a loaded gun behind her back. However, the scene faded out before we could know what happened next. This ending is a sad and brutal one. In this scenario, if you choose to kill Anne, the bogeyman crushes her head with his hammer, killing her immediately. A flashback to the prison riot reveals that Murphy accepted George's deal and murdered Frank. In the present, Murphy, holding a prison shank, finds Anne dead beside her father. He then screams because he's fed up with his life, takes Anne's gun, and you can probably guess what happens next. He then wakes up in the prison, and the wheelman is outside. Voices echo in his head, and as the wheelman leaves, Murphy pleads for it to stop. The cell doors open, and Murphy stands before the gate, realizing he shares the fate of others in Silent Hill, forever imprisoned in limbo, hoping for something or someone to save him. In this dramatic ending, the bogeyman attacks Anne with a hammer, and then the narrative shifts to Murphy's own execution day in prison, where he faces the consequences for murdering his son and a police officer, which is a crazy scenario that proves everything went wrong for him. The douchebag officer George asks Murphy for his last words, and Murphy says, "I'll see you in hell, Cupcake."
Yeah. I'll see you in hell. Cupcake.
Murphy then receives a lethal injection, and Anne witnesses the event, emotionally affected and dressed in grieving clothes. So this is basically the ending, where Murphy is the worst person possible for all the wrong reasons. And by the way, Murphy here allegedly killed his son because his ex-wife was granted full custody of the kid after their divorce. From the name of this ending, you probably already understand that it has an unexpected twist, but don't worry, it's a happy one. Here, regardless of the outcome of the final confrontation between the bogeyman and Anne, the scene transitions to Murphy secretly digging a tunnel out of prison with a spoon. He emerges into a dimly lit room where characters from Silent Hill Downpour and other significant figures from past Silent Hill games surprise him with a birthday celebration. Pyramid Head slices a large birthday cake with his great knife, leaving Murphy pleasantly surprised and happy. I was really hoping to say that the fate of this game was as happy as this ending, but sadly, things turned into a tragedy for the franchise's fans, and I'll explain why. If you reached this point in this video, you are probably wondering why the title of this video itself puts the game in a negative light. Because I'm pretty sure some of you who haven't played it before are saying right now, the story seems amazing and the game looks cool. This must be a successful game. Well, the problem, my friends, is that it looks interesting to you in this video because explaining game stories in movie format like this always tends to make things feel enticing because my point here is to entertain you. However, the experience that people had with the game directly as gamers is a completely different thing. And, by the way, I'm not saying this based on my opinion. It's actually based on how the game was received by the majority of players. The reason why I consider this installment to be the one that destroyed the series is because it's literally the amount of hope and expectations that Konami put on its shoulders compared to the results. Konami even assigned a new developer for Downpour because they wanted to revive the franchise with a new spirit and a fresh perspective. They were hoping that Downpour would be the installment that would pave the way for more and more installments in the future. But sadly, reality has a different opinion on this. When the game was released on March 13th, 2012, professional reviewers jumped to the arena to give their thoughts about it. And as you know, popular reviewers had and still have an impact on how the game gets received in people's minds. IGN gave it 4.5 out of 10, which is a score for a bad game, and Eurogamer gave it 6 out of 10, which is a score for an okay game. Not good or impressive, but just okay. However, the reviewers are not the only ones who had these negative opinions. The casual gamers themselves gave it 6.9 on Metacritic, which is one of the lowest scores for a major Silent Hill game ever. I say major because I don't include DLCs or side editions in this category. Some people might say that reviews don't matter as long as most people enjoy the game. Well, the problem with that point is that for people to enjoy the game, they need to buy it first. And this is the aspect that destroyed what's left of Konami's hopes. After 2 months of the game's release, less than 300,000 copies were sold across all platforms. And for a Silent Hill game, this is a very bad number. To understand how low it is, keep in mind that Silent Hill 2 sold more than 1 million copies in 1 month, even though it was at a time when buying games was not as easy as in 2012, after online game stores became popular. The poor sales were not even enough to cover the budget for making the game and promoting it, let alone making a profit. They even rebranded it from Silent Hill 8 to Downpour to make it feel more unique and special. This is basically the straw that broke the camel's back for Konami, because why would a company continue to support a franchise that doesn't even make money? But the real question is, was this game really this bad? Well, the answer is harder than a direct yes or no because people's experiences vary from one person to another. However, there were multiple common issues that most players simply couldn't overlook. One of the best summaries of these issues was stated in a good comment on our community post. The comment mentions quick time events, breakable weapons, and non-combat chase sequences. If you're not familiar with the game and you just rely on my story video, you probably wouldn't know that these problems exist, but sadly, they do exist, and in a bad way too. Quick-time events are basically everywhere here, especially with boss battles. People literally avoided fighting in the gameplay because they couldn't have straightforward combat like they wanted. When it comes to breakable weapons, it's also a pain that everyone suffered from. Clubs, knives, and axes can all break, and even shatter if you use them against the enemy heads regularly. The problem with the non-combat chase sequences here is that they simply happen more than required. They are cool at certain times, but in certain cases, you feel like you want to stop running and simply fight because running is not that fun, as we all know. There are also many cutscenes that you simply can't skip, and this is an annoying thing that didn't occur in previous installments. Another main problem was the drop in frame rate and the sudden crashes that forced Konami to make a patch that didn't even work very well. Players also felt that the enemy design here is completely unrelated to the Silent Hill franchise. They lack creativity and feel very repetitive in a way that you don't even get scared when encountering them for the first time. Even though the Void looks interesting at first, people didn't believe it was something special that added a layer of scary threat to the gameplay. Meanwhile, the Bogeyman was considered a Pyramid Head copycat, or basically a Pyramid Head ripoff. The new developers probably thought that since Pyramid Head is one of the most popular enemies of all time, emulating it might be a good idea. However, the inspiration was not as precise as they intended it to be. Anyway, there are many other issues, but I think you guys got the point and realize by now that this game actually had real issues that made people dislike it beyond the media's reviews, especially since the expectations were very high because of Konami's promises and advertising. I mentioned earlier in the intro that Resident Evil succeeded in having a different fate, but I forgot to mention that Resident Evil was basically going to fall into the same trap that Silent Hill fell into. After the success of Resident Evil 4, the series faced a surprising decline in Resident Evil 5 and a catastrophic decline in Resident Evil 6. People even started thinking that the franchise would lose its relevance at that point. And just like Konami, Capcom's last hope was literally one installment that could save them, And that installment was none other than Resident Evil 7. The game that simply, single-handedly saved the series from its apparent demise. This shows how Capcom knew exactly how to do their research correctly and knew what people wanted, while Konami wanted to force the audience to welcome something that looked nothing like what they loved about their favorite series. Anyway, I believe this is enough for today, and I believe you understood the message of this video. Tell me in the comments below what your personal thoughts about Downpour, especially since many of you already knew that this game was going to be the subject of this video when I gave you some hints in the community post yesterday. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you're new, and until next time, stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day or night.